This is the Sales Whisperer Podcast, Session 10. Are you a giver? Welcome, everybody. This is Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer. Today, I've got author, speaker, guru, Bob Burg. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, Wes. Great to be with you.
Hey, thank you very much. For those of you that don't know Bob, shame on you. But anyway, let me tell you a little bit about Bob. Can a subtle shift in focus really make that big of a difference in your business and income? When combining this shift in focus with 5 proven laws of success, can your business really become a lot more fun, a lot less stressful, a lot more profitable, and much more beneficial to your clients? Bob's answer to all of those is yes. You know what, Bob? It's funny how looking that over, one of the things I always say is sell more faster with less stress and more fun. And I swear I've never read this introduction that you've got. So maybe we're related and we didn't know it. So Bob is a sought-after speaker at corporate conventions for entrepreneurial events, regularly addresses audiences from as small as 50 to 16,000. He's shared the platform with many notables, including many of today's top thought leaders, broadcast personalities, Olympic athletes, and political leaders, including a former United States president. Bob and I met, so we're recording this on July 15th, 2013. We met at an Infusionsoft hands-on 2-day acceleration back in December of 2011. And I was already a big fan. I'd read his Endless Referrals book. We'll talk a little bit about that and about his new book, The Go-Givers. But I was impressed, Bob, because you... despite being a successful author, despite being a successful speaker and consultant, you were taking time out of your holiday, right? That was in between Christmas and New Year's. You were there with one of your assistants, rolling up your sleeves, working on your business. So can you dispel some of the rumors and myths out there that there's these bright, flashy, shiny, overnight successes, and you can just turn the key and hand it over to somebody and just make millions forever?
Well, I think those are all myths to dispel because other than the very, very few that come along and somehow find that instant success. I mean, I think Gladwell and Sean Colvin, who both talk about in their respective books that 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Kathy Zader, my business partner, who I was there with, she and I are always continually working on the business as well as in the business. And so when we had the opportunity to attend that conference, we jumped at it, and it's done us a lot of good. Kathy is an expert when it comes to anything with technology, and she loves Infusionsoft, and so that was quite a natural. I went down there with her, and really I found myself excuse me, just really enjoying the whole process. There was so much learning. There were so many things that I didn't know. And of course, I'm lucky in that usually I know that I don't know, as opposed to thinking I know.
Right.
The biggest difference in my life came when I realized how little I knew. And so yeah, we're constantly trying to learn and grow. And I think anybody who's reached a modicum of success, I think that's their basic attitude.
Yeah, and I always tell people, I do a lot of work, obviously, with Infusionsoft, but I work with most platforms out there, Salesforce.com, Aweber, Constant Contact. And most of the time I'll tell business owners that rarely is it in their best interest to become an expert in the technology, but they at least need to know its capabilities, right? And I tell people, you as the business owner have to know your process, or at least what you want to happen, so at least you can give instructions to your team on, say, basically, here's what I want to happen. The technology, to a degree, doesn't matter, right, as long as your process is mapped out and executed. So is that a fair assessment as a successful business owner?
Well, it is. My premise, I would guess, of everything that I teach and everything I've built my own business by is simply that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. One thing I never say is that people will do business with and refer business to those computers they know, like, trust, or the software or contact relationship management or anything like that. It's all about the people and the technology, which is great. The technology is there just as a medium to facilitate those relationships. So really, that's what it's about.
So what compelled you and propelled you into becoming an author? Several of my initial interviewees coming on the Sales Whisperer podcast have been authors. And so, I wrote my Infusionsoft book last year and myself published it. I'm working on another one. And so I'm still learning too. But can you walk our listeners through just the writing process as we move from the Endless Referrals into your latest Go Giver?
Yeah, well, that's one big book you wrote. That is a monster book. So I don't know how you did that.
I was crazy.
When I wrote my first book, Endless Referrals, that was really simply as a positioning tool. I had been a speaker for a couple of years, and I had just gotten to that point where the business was starting to take off. And I had joined National Speakers Association, and many of my friends there had told me that writing a book was a great way to position yourself in the market. Higher fees, more notability, you became more marketable. It was a great tool, positioning tool, really. And so that's why I wrote it. I didn't really have any desire to write a book per se, but I did it for that specific reason. And they were right. That really helped me a lot. That particular book got me very few clients on a reactive basis. In other words, very few clients called. A few did, but very few called me and said, "Oh, we got your book at the bookstore," or "It went through our business. We'd love to have you come in." That happened very seldom. But and back then, I was a prospecting machine. I mean, that's what I did to build the business, and so I could utilize that book as a real business building tool, and I did. Right. So it was a great move, and that was published through a traditional house. The next book I did, and I sold, I think, that book has sold 250,000 copies since the time it's been out. This is since the mid or early to mid 90s. But the next book I did after that, and I had been working in a niche market that bought a lot of books. And so that I think I sold 100,000 copies of that book within a couple of years. And in a sense, I had a distribution system ready made. So I wrote another book and I self-published that one. And within a year, sold 100,000 copies through that. Now, again, that was because I'd already had an established clientele.
Right.
So, I've had a few books out over the years, and some have done great, and others haven't. A couple of them really tanked. But I've been fortunate to have 4 books now that have each sold over 250,000 copies. So, and the last one being, not my last book, but the last one that sold that heavily being The Go Giver. And this was a little bit different. This was... kind of wrote this one because and first of all, I didn't write it myself. I co-authored this with John David Mann, who's a brilliant, brilliant writer. And this one was a parable. And I'd always liked the idea of parables. I've been reading them since I'd been in sales, starting with Og Mandino's Greatest Salesman in the World, and Klassen's Richest Man in Babylon. And back in the early 80s, you had Doctors Blanchard and Johnson with their 1-minute series, and then Dr. Johnson's Who Moved My Cheese. Books from people like Robin Sharma and Donna Hudson, and just all great books out there. Parables that you could read in an hour or hour and a half. Was fun, had a great message, and I thought I'd love to take the basic premise of Endless Referrals, which is really that when you can take your focus off yourself and focus on giving value or adding value to the lives of others, you're creating those know, like, and trust relationships. Mm-hmm. So carried it around in my head for a couple of years, really, till I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it, and even began to outline a little bit and sketch out the characters. But as I sat down to write, I got to tell you, it took me all of about 30 seconds to realize that there is a big difference between writing a how-to book, which I think anyone can do. You basically write down what you know and then get a good editor. There's a big difference between that and writing a work of fiction, which is what The Go-Giver would be as a business parable.
Right.
Fortunately, I'd been writing for a magazine in which John David Mann was the editor-in-chief, and was such a great editor. And I knew of his reputation as a fantastic ghostwriter. He had been the person behind a couple of big selling books. Now everybody knows about him, and he's had many New York Times bestsellers out. But back then that wasn't the case. And I called John, and I just told him about this idea, and he was very busy because he had a lot of people wanting him to ghostwrite books. But he and his fiance back then, now his wife Anna, they were visiting her mom in Tampa. They decided to come over across the state to Jupiter, Florida, where I live. We went out to dinner, shared the story idea with them, and I took it back. And about 3 weeks later, he called to say he thought it had some potential. And so I got to tell you, I was so happy about that. I acted very cool. Okay, good, John. Well, we'll talk about it. And, we got off the phone, and I'm like, because I knew John could really work magic with this thing. So he was the lead writer and main storyteller. And we worked on this thing really only for a few months. Went through, in the course of a year, our agent went through 25 rejections. So it wasn't as though the publishers were fighting for it. But a year later, after some revisions and a little bit of a marketing makeover, if you will, as far as how we were going to write it, or where the story was going, we found the right publisher, Portfolio, which is a division of Penguin, and they have been just amazing. They've been the best. I've worked with several publishers now. They've all been good. They're all good people. But this one is just the most supportive, the most team-oriented that I've had the privilege to work with. And they're great. They're very, very supportive of the marketing, and that's, as you know, that's a big part of a book. I mean, in a sense, as difficult as it can be to write a book, that's the easy part. The tough part is marketing a book. And, if you can do that, now you've got a chance to get something out there that's going to hopefully add some value to some lives.
Well, something that's interesting. Oh, I'm getting a little feedback here. So something that's interesting that you mentioned, and is that from the outside looking in, right? You're a very successful, well-known speaker, author, etc., and you're working with a very successful editor, co-author. But you said something interesting, that despite those type of credentials, you were still shot down by some publishers, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, still had to fight it out, and I think maybe you gloss over that a little bit, but I think it's encouraging for you to, share that with, because there's a lot of beginners, right? Like, oh, I got turned down. Oh, woe's me. I'll go back to my corporate job, right? But despite your success, you still had to fight. Is that just the nature of the beast today? Or, is it just that hard, but anything worth doing is worth the struggle?
Well, I suspect it's always been the nature of the beast. It might be a bit more in the open now that happens, or might be more visible. But no, I think there's any idea, anything that's been invented, anything that's been, it was never easy. Seth Godin tells about the story of Friedrich, I think it's, and I can't think of the last name, Rewetter or Rereader, and I apologize, I can't think of it, but right. The person who invented the sliced bread machine. All right. Rowetter, I think. Rowetter. And you'd think, okay, well, we what do we say now? Something's the greatest invention since sliced bread. So obviously the moment that was invented, it must have sold, right? Well, not at all. It was 20 years before it sold. And that's only because a company named Wonder bought the rights to it and began using it to slice their bread. So, any idea, look at Chicken Soup for the Soul and Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield they certainly weren't as big as they were afterwards, but even beforehand, they had sold a lot of books and they were very well known in the business. And I think they went through 100 or so rejections before finally selling a series that has sold about 500 million books. So I think one of the biggest things, Wes, that hurts people, that stops potentially very, very successful people in their tracks, is thinking that they're the only ones that get told no. And they're not. I mean, if you're doing anything significant, you're going to get told no. It's just the nature of the world, the way it is. You know, a good friend of mine, Andrea Fenton, and Andrea Waltz and her husband, Richard Fenton, they have a great book called Go for No. And it's all about their basic premise is that yes is the destination, no is how you get there. And it's such a wonderful book because not only is the basic lesson that you should, that you accept the no's, which I think we all understand that in a sense, but in their case, they say embrace it. You can embrace those no's and actually utilize those no's as a way to move yourself forward to where you want to be, toward that ultimate yes. So when people start something new, hey, if someone tells you it's a lousy idea, it doesn't mean you just ignore it. You can consider the source and consider who's telling you and what, but check your premises. Why would they say that? What are they basing that on? What's their experience? You get different opinions. That's, nobody's saying to bury your head in the sand and not in the ground and not pay attention to. But, when people say no, just understand you're not the only one that's gotten a no. Pretty much everyone doing anything significant has, and you can feel good about that, as opposed to letting that discourage you.
Well, obviously, you two knew best because within 3 weeks you were number 6 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller, and number 9 on Business Week.
Yeah, it has done well. It's a story people have related to, and what's funny is the early adapters were the people who were already very successful, leading big teams and had big sales numbers and so forth. These are the people who didn't need this book. They were already running their lives and conducting their businesses through the 5 laws we talk about in the book, but they passed it along to others. And it was that sort of 6 to 9 month delay in which we started hearing from people who said that their business has been turned around as a result of reading this book, and that they had received it from the suggestion of a leader they knew or a successful salesperson they knew. So we've been very gratified by that, certainly.
So you talk about it's the 5 laws of stratospheric success, right? And you talk about the law of value. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, and I think this is, while all 5 of the laws need to be used together in conjunction, the law of value is sort of the foundational law. It's the foundation upon which everything else is built. And the law of value simply says your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Now, this sounds sort of counterproductive when you first hear it. Because really, when you think of it, give more in value than you take in payment. That sounds like a recipe for bankruptcy. I mean, give more in value than you take in payment. Sounds like one of those sort of nicey nice things that sound good, but wouldn't work in the real world. We simply have to understand the difference between price and value. Price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It is what it is. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, that brings with it so much worth or value that someone will willingly exchange their money for this and be ecstatic that they did while you make a very healthy profit? A very basic example might be that you hire an accountant to do your taxes, and the accountant charges you $1,000. That's his fee or his price. But what value does he give you in exchange for this? Well, he saves you $5,000 in taxes. He saves you countless hours that allow you to do what you're more qualified to do, would have more fun doing, and can be more productive doing. Perhaps most importantly, he provides you with the security and the peace of mind of knowing it was done correctly. So we see that value can be both concrete in terms of the money. It can also be conceptual in terms of the amount of time saved and the peace of mind. Right. So what happens is he gave you well over $5,000 in value or use value in exchange for $1,000 price. or cash value. So he gave you more in value than he took in payment. So you feel great about it, and he made a very healthy profit, which he should. And that's the kind of relationship we want to have with anyone with whom we do business. We want to give them such a unique, exceptional, terrific buying experience that they feel great about it, and we make a very healthy profit. Now, this happens only through focus, and the correct focus. The entire premise of the Go-Giver is simply that shifting your focus from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing value to others. And doing this is not only a nice way to live life, it's a very financially profitable way, because, Wes, as you know, if your focus is on yourself, and your focus is on the paycheck, and your focus is that you see this person merely as a commission check, they're going to know this, and they're going to not feel good about you. They're not going to trust you. They're not going to. But when they can tell you're absolutely, undeniably, and unabridgedly focused on making their life better, easier, more fulfilling, whatever the value you bring to the table, they're much more likely to do business with you, which is why we say that money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder to values lightning, which means nothing more than that the value comes first, and the money you receive is simply a very natural and direct result of the value you provide.
I remember Zig Ziglar talking about that. He said, basically feel good about what you charge. He said, because he said, how many of you have clients still enjoying and benefiting from one of your products a year later, 5 years later, 20 years later? A lot of people raise their hands. He says, how many of you have the commission check, from the sale that you made? So even if you charge a lot, relatively speaking, if it's a great product or service and those people have those benefits,
sure.
And it could be long-term, could be a 20-year home, or peace of mind. If somebody was able to sleep because that accountant fixed their issue, enjoy, take comfort and pride in earning a good living, right?
Sure. Well, the big thing is, in a free market-based exchange, both parties come out ahead of where they were before the transaction. For example, the book you wrote, and again, that is one big book. And so, somebody buys that book. How much do you charge for that book?
$49.99.
Okay, so somebody pays $49.99, and that's the price of the book. But through the wisdom in that book, they're able to increase their business by tens of thousands of dollars a year.
Sure.
Well, they made much more they got much more use value than what they paid for it, and you made a very healthy profit in your book. And so both parties came out ahead. Now, the second law is the law of compensation, and this says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. The next step is that, if you sell that book to 1,000 people or 100,000 people, now your income is a lot more than just selling one book. So the second law basically says that while providing that great value is very, very important, that just represents your potential income. Your actual income is represented in this case by how many people's lives you touch with the information in that book. So, it's the same when someone, buys your consulting services for Infusionsoft. You're charging them a very good price. You should be making a very healthy profit from it, because you're giving them so much more in use value than what you're taking, but you're still making a very healthy profit, which you should. And then the more people whose lives you touch by helping them increase their business, the more money you make for yourself. So it's always a win-win when done correctly.
So you break some paradigms on sales in this book. What's a couple that you can talk about briefly?
Well, I think people have a misperception about what selling is. And, many times people think selling is about trying to convince someone to buy something they don't want or need, when in actuality it's just the opposite. It's finding out what someone does want or need and helping them to get it. Some people think selling is about taking advantage of others. Just the opposite. It's about bringing people more advantage through your product or service. Perhaps the biggest upside-down misperception about selling is that at its foundation, it's about taking. But again, that's not so. Selling at its core, at its utmost, at its most profitable, is actually all about giving. And I mean that literally. And if you say, well, no, you mean figuratively. No, I mean it literally, because the old English root of the word sell, selan, meant to give. So when you're selling, you're literally giving. Now, isn't that just semantics? Well, I don't think so. I would ask a question. When you're in the selling process, when you've got a person in front of you, you're about to do a presentation for this person in terms of, whether they should be purchasing the product. What are you giving them in this presentation? Well, I suggest you're giving them time, attention, counsel, education, empathy, and most of all, value. So when you're selling, you're giving. And I say this because I want people who are in sales to feel proud about what they're doing. It bothers me when I hear people say, well, yeah, I'm in sales, but I don't really sell. I just help people. I mean, the false premise is that selling isn't about helping people. Or people will say something like, stop selling, start serving. Well, no, selling is serving. That's the nature of the thing. That is what you're doing. So, I get a little bit on that soapbox a little bit, but I also think it's very important sometimes when speaking about semantics. It's important because we've got to know the meaning of what we do in order to embrace it.
Well, and you talk about in here too, though, and I love this, that a sale cannot be made, right? You can't make a sale.
Right, you can't make it.
What do you mean there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the reason we say you can't make a sale is because in a free market-based economy, you can't make anyone do anything they don't want. So you literally cannot make a sale. What you can do is you can create the environment where that person knows, likes, and trusts you. They respect your judgment. They know you're concerned about providing value to them, and they choose to buy, and you're there to receive the sale. Now, again, that isn't that semantics, and that might be, and that's okay, because sometimes what we say to ourselves about what we do is just as important as what we tell others about what we do. You see, Wes, if we believe that what we're supposed to be doing is going out there to make the sale, then really it's all about us and our product or service. If, on the other hand, we believe we're simply out there to create the context where that person, based on their self-interest, they decide to buy because they know it's best for them, then our focus is on them. And that's exactly where it's supposed to be. Adam Grant came out with a book recently called Give and Take. He's a business professor at Wharton, award-winning business professor at Wharton Business School. And they did he cited in his book, Give and Take, a Australian study of financial advisors. And these were the most financially successful financial advisors. So these are stockbrokers, people who are out there selling financial advice, really, when you think of it. And so what was it that they wanted to know? What was it that made them so financially successful, the cream of the crop in terms of selling goes? And, of course, they looked at areas such as financial expertise and hard work, both of which were very important and certainly showed up in all the people who were near the top. But that was not the determining factor. The determining factor was those who made the most money in their business. They put the interests of their clients above themselves and above their companies. And as a result of that, they and their companies also profited the most.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic, isn't it? One of the things I tell people, selling is a calling, and I say, serving is its purpose. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how, and again, I've said that for years. And I say, questioning is the process, right? But that gets more into technique and whatnot. But, I love it because people say, like, they'll come to me, hey, hear the sales whisper, and hey, give me this way to overcome an objection or whatever, like these arm wrestling techniques. And it's like, no, I never close a sale anymore. I end a conversation with, what would you like to do next? How would you like to proceed? And really a lot of times when I do it really right, they ask me, what's the next step? Or how do I begin? that's when you've done it right, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you got to tee this up. There's two things though I want to ask you about before we end, and one is the MacGuffin.
Well, yeah, a MacGuffin it's a movie term that was coined by the late British film director Alfred Hitchcock, and I learned that from John David Mann, my co-author, because he's also a screenwriter, so he knew of that term. And a MacGuffin is simply it's a movie term that means that's the object around which the story revolves, and I'll tie that into sales in just a moment. For example, you take a classic like The Wizard of Oz. The MacGuffin was Dorothy's quest to get back home to Kansas. That was the MacGuffin. That's what it all centered around. But when you get to the end of the story, you realize that the MacGuffin really isn't what the story is about. It wasn't really about that. It was about four friends who came to realize that the character traits they each thought they lacked, they actually had. They just needed to step into them and embrace them. In the movie Rocky, another classic, the MacGuffin was the 15-round heavyweight championship fight with Apollo Creed. But again, you get to the end of the story, you realize that's not what the movie was about. It was about one man's struggle to find himself. He found a guy who felt like a loser at the beginning of the story, who at the end understood he was really a winner in life with a lot of value to offer the people he loved and those who loved him. Well, in the same way that the MacGuffin really isn't what the story is about, your product or service is not what the sale is about. You talk about this beautifully in the video you do on your website when you talk about the software simply being what it takes to really help a person get what they want. They don't want the software. They want a way to run their business in a way that's far more effective, gives them more fun, less stress, it's more profitable, and it does all these things you want them to do. There's that old selling story I'm sure you've heard. Most of us heard this 30 years ago in our Basic Sales 101 class at our first seminar. The story is told that each and every year, millions and millions and millions of quarter-inch drill bits are bought, and yet not one person buying one of these millions and millions and millions of quarter-inch drill bits actually wants a quarter-inch drill bit. What they want is a quarter-inch hole. The drill bit is simply the MacGuffin. It's the medium, the product or service that gets them what they really want. Now, does the MacGuffin, does the drill bit have to be good? Of course. Does it have to work? Certainly. Should you guarantee it? Of course. But that's not what the sale is about. It's always about what the prospect sees it as being about.
Right. I love that. And then the law of left field.
Well, this is kind of an interesting one because it's, the 5 laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. And the law of left field is actually a sub-law or mini-law within the law of receptivity. And it simply says the greatest gifts will come to you at moments and from places you least expect. The basic key of this is when living our lives and conducting business according to these principles, great value will come to us sort of from, those unnoticed, unseen places, that last-minute referral or that crucial connection that just comes about and turns into a very lucrative new client, or some golden opportunity just drops suddenly into your lap, and we tend to think, wow, that one just came right out of left field. But when you go back to it, really what you've done is you've planted so many seeds of goodwill, of great will. You've created so many relationships where people know you, like you, trust you, want to see you succeed, want to be a part of your life, that what's happened is you've created what we call a benevolent context for your success. And while you can't necessarily see its operation, there is cause and effect. The cause is giving value. The effect is receiving value, simply in a different form. So the law of left field basically says, when you do this and you focus on providing value, giving value to others on a constant and continuing basis, you're going to get all sorts of abundance coming your way as well. And there's going to be times it's from right in front of your eyes, and there's going to be other times it comes out of left field, seemingly out of nowhere. But in actuality, it came out of everywhere. It comes from the gravitational pull of your influence, which you have created.
So it's kind of like the old saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah, a lot like that.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, we've all gone through valleys, right? We have the peaks, but we have the valleys too. I'm reading Steve Jobs' book right now. I mean, golly, he was so young. I mean, it was worth $256 million and gets kicked out of his own company, and then he starts next and kind of successful, but kind of not. And then he found Pixar and, became a $1.2 billion he was worth when their IPO. Then he goes back to Apple. So all this up and down. But, I mean, we all get it. But, something I like to teach people is, and you were talking about this earlier, but basically, you can't make a sale. Right, but I always tell sales managers, manage activity and pay on results. Mm-hmm. So it's like if we just know the little bitty things or what seem little bit, like every hour of every day, right? What do you do? And if you just do all those little right things over and over, that builds up this this law of left field, right? Because that's basically what you're saying is just do a lot of little right things consistently.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right? Instead of one big thing.
Right.
Well, fantastic. I mean, thanks for taking the time, for this interview. What's the best way for folks to reach you? I know it's Burg.com, BURG.com. That's your hub, right?
Yeah, that's the perfect place. While they're there, they can subscribe to our Influence and Success Insights. They can download Chapter 1 of The Go-Giver and connect with me on my blog and on all the various social media that they like. Everything is right there, as you said, at the hub at Burg.com.
There you go. And powered by Infusionsoft, huh?
That's right.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, Bob. And any final words, parting words, motivation for our listeners?
No, I just appreciate all you're doing. You're certainly you embody the go-giver attitude. You bring so much value to the lives of so many people. So keep up the great work.
I will do it. Thank you, sir. I look forward to seeing you soon at a conference coming up.
Absolutely.
What a great guy with fantastic advice on how to build your business. Funny how it kind of resembles the Bible, huh? It's better to give than to receive. Be sure to visit my website or Amazon. Check out Bob's latest book, The Go-Giver. I also bought his Endless Referrals years ago. It is marked up and dog-eared like very few other books that I have. If you ever come by the office, I'll show you. And also be sure to leave a few kind words on this podcast at thesaleswhisperer.com and also at iTunes. Again, everything you do to help me grow helps me provide this type of free training, and everybody benefits. So thank you for listening. Go out and sell different. Thank you for listening to the Sales Whisperer podcast at www.thesaleswhisperer.com.